If you could introduce yourself and tell me about how you started talking to the RFPA.
As always, it was something providential from God. That was in June 2020 when I first learned about the work of the RFPA. It was through consultation that Pastor Angus Stewart of the CPRC made to see the possibility of translating the chapters of the first edition of the book Saved by Grace. That was on the PRC website. Because of this, my first RFPA contact I had was Alex Kalchvik, who told us about the existence of a second version, more complete and updated version of this book, but it was only available in the hardcover. After that, Alex mailed me to my postal code here in Peru the new version of the book Saved by Grace. Sometime after I received the book at home and after having read it, I understood clearly about the doctrine of the Protestant Reformed Church. And I was very motivated to ask Alex for the possibility of translating that book. Finally, in November 2021, I received approval from RFPA to officially translate the second version of Saved by Grace. And that is how I started contacting you and how I began to translate my first book for the RFPA.
It seems like a lot of translators trace their history with the RFPA back to the CPRC. So
yes,
we are very blessed by them and by them getting in contact with you. So which languages do you translate from and into when you do your translations?
God has given me the talent of having learned the English language, which has helped me not only to work in my professional or information technology in American companies, but also to translate to Spanish different articles, pamphlets, and now books. All of them theological, always related to Reformed faith.
Have you been translating for many years then, even before your contact with the RFPA?
I started a translation, the articles for Pastor Angus, 2020, January 2020.
What does the process of translation look like for you? How do you start those translations?
Okay, the process obviously starts with the official electronic document sent by you. If it is in PDF format, I convert it into a Word document because that is where I am going to do the translation. Then I divide the document by chapters or by subtitles within each chapter to facilitate the translation. With a document thus divided, I read it. In this way, I get a message. In this part of reading, if I find any accidental error in the original document, such as an error in the numbering of the chapter or verse that refer to the book of the Bible, I highlight those possible errors to inform you later, and with your confirmation of the change, I consider it for the final translation into Spanish. Then I read by paragraphs, which are composed of several sentences until the final punctuations, which is where the idea of each paragraph closes. And in parallel, I am translating. And so on, I continued with the following paragraph until I finish. Once the entire document has been translated, and before sending to RFPA, I read it again to find any misspelling or punctuation error, or to find any inconsistency in what I have read. I make the necessary corrections, and then I am ready to send it to you. That is about the translation stage. After that comes the stage of proofreading, a proofreading to be translated document, which is done by another person called the proofreader. And the objective of this is to detect any other error that the proofreader could find, and thus we interact and make sure that the work is totally reliable and ready for publication.
Do you have other future projects, other books that you're interested in doing for the RFPA?
Yes, in February 2023, I finished the translation of the book, I Belong. Currently, I am translating the book, Behold, He Cometh. There are, we have 3 books for RFPA at this moment. 2 finished and 1 actually translating.
So what do you typically do with the translations after you finish them, for the articles or for the books?
I would like to do much more, but time sometimes beats us or wins us. At the finished translation, I make them now in a general way, mainly to my wife and my 3 married children and their families, as well as to other Christian friends. For my children and their families, I take advantage of the Lord's Day to invite and teach them at home on some translated topics. During the pandemic 2020, a Reformed Baptist Church invited me to expose virtually the doctrines of grace, as we call here the 5 points of Calvinism. I was able to expose several weeks, and my original source of teaching was the content of the first edition of the book, Saved by Grace. And finally, I have created a Facebook page in Spanish under the name Reformed Literature RFPA, in order to publicize the RFPA books that have been translated or are being translated into Spanish, to publicize the importance of the RFPA, its authors or writers, and thus promote the Reformed reading under the 3 forms of unity. Just this Facebook page is still under review.
What should believers know about the spread of the gospel in Peru and in Spanish, and as far as you understand it?
Yes, important question. There are a lot of evangelical Christian churches throughout Latin America and in the country where I live. We can say that the Reformation is just coming to this Latin American continent. Today, people are beginning to talk about Calvinism or Arminianism or the 5 points of the doctrine of grace, terms that before were not even heard. Even now those evangelical churches, incredible, remember every October the Protestant Reformation. So that did not happen before. That did not happen before. But also, I see many disappointments or discontent with the churches where people are attending. Surely they come internal spiritual conflict as they begin to know the Protestant Reformation. Therefore, it is important to anticipate and make known the continental Reformed Protestant knowledge under the 3 forms of unity, to teach the consistency of the truth of God's word and Reformed orthodoxy. It is our responsibility, my responsibility, to know how to discern the times. It is a virgin field to preach the truth without any restriction or any prohibitions as they exist in other continents, as they exist in other countries. Here in Peru and Latin America, we don't have restrictions to preach the gospel. No, we don't have prohibitions. So it's like saying to them, and as I always say to my children, come on, the table is served. The table is served. So for this reason, to have more time, for my time, I am leaving aside my professional activities for the translation and spreading of the Reformed biblical faith. This is my responsibility to my God.
In that case as well, how can we at the RFPA and other believers who support the RFPA, how can we support you as you translate, and what do you need from us, from other believers?
As an initial thought, it is important to understand that after the English Chinese languages, Spanish is the 3rd or 4th most spoken language in the world. Another important fact to consider is that Spanish is number two in the top languages with more native speakers. It is only below the Chinese language and before English. Because of this, I also encourage to the members of the RFPA and PRCA can learn the Spanish language, and so you can have contact with the reality of Latin America. It also seems to me that PRCI has a great experience in missions, in foreign missions, and they can help us to make a list of books that they consider necessary to translate them as a teaching and complement to the sufficient word of God. In the meantime, with God's help and in prayer, I hope to consolidate a group here, starting with my children and their family, who are all believers. They are baptized as children in the pre-adolescence stage in the church where we were attending for 31 long years, and where my children were practically born in that church. So this is my mission for them, because it's very important to know the truth of the word of God and know here in Peru, they are teaching for interest, personal interest, or church interest, but not preach the truth of our God.
It sounds like you would welcome visitors as well, then, from the PRCA, people interested in learning Spanish and helping spread the gospel in that way. That's good to
Could
hear.
be.
Yeah. Do you have any thoughts or feedback you want to direct to the RFPA, or any questions for me or other believers?
No, I just want to thank God first to this beautiful time. For me, it's beautiful because I cannot imagine that we can contact with the RFPA team, and may God and only He continue to use us for His eternal purposes.